Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. My name is Julia Talbot. I'm at the Department of Family and Support Services, and today I am welcoming you to a really great opportunity that we have. It's the Shelter Infrastructure Initiative. It's an RFQ, not an RFP, and it's through our Homeless Service Division. I'm going to go through a little bit, a few housekeeping things before we get started. So due to the volume of participants and just a standard practice here at DFSS, we mute everybody. If you have a question or you're having a problem with access, feel free to use the question box. Ask your questions or let us know about any technical problems you might be having. I will say the next thing about 4 times. This webinar is being recorded. A copy of the recording will be posted on the DFSS YouTube channel with a link to the recording and a PDF of these very PowerPoint slides that you are seeing. It's almost like you could capture them forever. And those will be posted to the DFSS webpage. I have the webpage address here under the alerts and or funding opportunities tabs associated with this initiative. Please, please, please allow for 5 business days for this to happen. We have to download stuff, we have to translate stuff, we have to re-upload it to the YouTube channel, and we have to upload it to the DFSS homepage. Those things take time. I will say this again, that this will be posted. You can email me, and I might not have those things to share with you, say 20 minutes after this presentation, which seems to happen pretty much every time we do a webinar. But there you go. Please allow 5 business days. Just so that you will be aware, the city of Chicago is closed this coming Monday. So I anticipate these not being available to anybody until maybe mid-week next week at the earliest. So that's my speech, and sticking to it. Now I'm going on to the agenda. I am joined here today by 2 amazing colleagues at the City of Chicago Department of Family and Support Services in our Homeless Division. This will be Amy Cornell, who's a project manager here, and Kim Howard, who is a director in the Homeless Services Division. They are going to be going through the background and the information about this RFQ. They are the program experts and subject area experts as well around homelessness. After that, we're going to break for questions, and then I will go through the technical aspects of making an application in the city's e-procurement system, and then we'll have time for more questions. At this point, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Amy and Kim. So thank you for your attention and for coming, and please put your questions in the question box as they come up.
Great, thanks so much, Julia, and thanks to everyone for joining us today. My name is Kim Howard. I'm a director with the Homeless Services Division here at DFSS, and very excited to be talking through this opportunity with all of you today. So I'm going to start us with some of the sort of background and goals for this RFQ as the first stage of this shelter infrastructure initiative through DFSS. And then I'll be passing over to Amy to walk through sort of this opportunity specifically. So overall, this is an opportunity through the Homeless Services Division with DFSS. This is sort of the first stage of us leveraging Chicago Recovery Plan funding with the hopes of creating really sustainable capital improvements in our existing shelter system. Ultimately, the purpose of this sort of first stage of the process is to qualify homeless shelter operators who are in need of repairs and renovations in their existing facilities. And overall, we're seeking to increase accessibility and non-congregate spaces for clients served in shelters, sustain and improve the quality of our shelter facilities in Chicago, and ideally restore some of the beds that were lost due to COVID-19 in response to public health guidance. And so I will say this sort of multiple times throughout, but this is really the first stage. Once we go through the RFQ process, that will sort of qualify folks to then work with us more closely on specific projects. And we will also be inviting folks to submit an RFP later in the year for specific grant funding for shelter facility repairs and renovations. So I'll start with a little bit of background of sort of why we're releasing this funding opportunity. I think this will be very familiar to folks on the call. But over the last couple years, the pandemic really highlighted the risk to health and safety for our residents living in congregate shelters. Pre-COVID, that was a sort of a good portion of our shelter system. So 1/3 of all shelter beds in the DFSS funded system were in shared rooms with sort of over 20 people in a room and shared bathrooms. That's particularly true for the single adult population. So it's actually over 80% of beds for the single adult population were in shared rooms with over 20 people. And so, as many of you know, in response to the pandemic, we worked really closely with the Chicago Department of Public Health and our healthcare partners to make those spaces as safe as we could to still, maintain capacity, but also recognize sort of the risk to health and safety. The city also funded beds at alternate shelters to partially restore capacity, including in congregate spaces and in hotel rooms. And so our system has learned a ton from this experience, and this funding opportunity really comes out of those learnings. I particularly want to highlight sort of one of the learnings from that experience, which is that both sort of nationally and in Chicago, we saw really great benefits of non-congregate sheltering based on housing folks in hotel rooms. So this was based on a study done locally in Chicago through the Chicago Department of Public Health, University of Chicago Medicine, and Lawndale Christian, based on surveying sort of high-risk individuals who were previously in congregate shelters and moving them to hotel rooms during the pandemic. We saw really positive effects, both in terms of limiting the incidence of COVID cases, but also in sort of these other measures of client well-being that we really care about. So one, sort of reduced emergencies and interpersonal conflict, and improved sort of client well-being and reported feelings of safety, security, and optimism. And we also saw, really importantly, high rates of engagement with service providers and exits to permanent housing following the shelter program. So building on those learnings, we have a really exciting opportunity now with the Chicago Recovery Plan. I think folks have also heard us say this multiple times, but the Chicago Recovery Plan is a historic $1.2 billion investment for communities and populations in Chicago hit hardest by COVID-19. It is funded through sort of a combination of funds we're receiving from the federal government through the American Rescue Plan, as well as sort of local Chicago bond commitments in support of that funding. And so we are looking to leverage this funding with the Shelter Infrastructure Initiative, as I said, to advance a more non-congregate and more accessible shelter strategy and system, sustain our current bed capacity, which is this in the DFSS supported system is roughly 3,000 beds, and ideally to replenish lost bed capacity and potentially expand beyond based on system-wide needs. So just to give folks a sense, we were operating 3,300 DFSS supported beds pre-pandemic, so that puts us down roughly 300 to 350 beds compared to our pre-COVID capacity. So this DFSS RFQ is not the only piece of this work to achieve these goals. We are extremely excited to be working closely with the Department of Housing and the Chicago Department of Public Health on a couple parallel opportunities. So wanted to take a moment here to sort of distinguish what is this funding opportunity versus what are some of the other opportunities that you may have seen. First of all, I think the one that's sort of moving the fastest is through the Department of Housing for this acquisition of new non-congregate shelters. That is $30 million through the Chicago Recovery Plan with the goal of acquiring new facilities for shelters to move into. So at this point, DOH has released that funding opportunity. They have closed it and identified 5 awardee finalists, and they are in the process with us and with the awardee finalists of identifying and purchasing facilities. So that is moving, and we're extremely excited to see the impact of that on our system. And so our opportunity that we're talking about today is based on $20 million in the Chicago Recovery Plan that sits with DFSS. We may have additional funding of up to an additional $20 million in home ARP funding to supplement these funds. And this is really focused on providing grants to current shelter operators to improve their existing shelter sites. And then the last opportunity that you may have heard about is through the Chicago Department of Public Health to both acquire and run a stabilization housing program for people who are sort of frequent utilizers of emergency response systems, including the homeless services system. So we anticipate this will also be a really exciting opportunity for our system, and that RFP will be coming out soon. So just to really drive home what we're talking about today, we are talking about a DFSS shelter infrastructure RFQ, and through this RFQ, we are starting the process of providing capital funding to shelter operators for conversion and renovation of their existing facilities. It is not to provide operational funding for shelters, nor is it to provide acquisition funding for new facilities. And with that, I think I am handing over to Amy to dive into the specifics of this RFQ. Just want to say thank you again so much. We're really excited to work with you all on this. Over to you, Amy.
Thank you, Kim. As Julia said, this is Amy Cornell, and I am a CRP project manager and fortunate enough to be working on this shelter infrastructure initiative as one of my projects. So hello to everyone, and let me tell you about who is eligible for this funding source. It's for nonprofit entities currently operating one or more homeless shelters within the city, and that includes shelters for domestic violence and gender-based violence survivors. Definition: a homeless shelter is a program providing households that are literally homeless a temporary, safe environment with a place to sleep free of charge and with a low barrier to entry, which is key, a key best practice nationally that we ask all shelters to implement. All shelter providers are highly encouraged to respond to this RFQ. We are very much interested in learning about the system-wide needs of the shelter system and the repairs and rehabs and your thoughts on converting to less congregate settings. So we highly encourage you to complete this request if you have facility issues you need assistance with. Respondents must adhere to a variety of continuum of care and DFSS requirements and regulations for shelters at the time of the contract. These are requirements you all are familiar with as existing shelter providers, and respondents who are current DFSS delegates must be in good standing with the department. We anticipate qualifying up to 10 shelters through this request for qualifications process, and those folks will be invited to submit a request for proposal. So this is a two-phase RFQ, RFP process for funding. There's 3 different stages. The first stage is request for qualifications, which we are right in the middle of right now. Respondent receives an email of RFQ request and webinar date. Hopefully you all received that information. I know you're here. So you found out about us some way. Respondent will attend bidders conference to learn about RFQ process and ask questions. Again, that's why you're here. Thank you. And then respondent will complete RFQ application and return to DFSS. So the next stage, when DFSS is going to score the RFQs, and eligible respondents will be notified about proceeding to the next stage. So the second stage is to undergo a project readiness review. And respondents will be participating in an intake meeting with both DFSS and a third-party program administrator that's going to partner with the shelters to plan and complete the construction projects. The respondent will work with the PA to conduct the project readiness review, which is an initial assessment of feasibility of the proposed project, and to identify any major challenges that may need to be overcome. And the PA will submit the project readiness reviews to DFSS. So it's the PA that will report the findings of these reviews to DFSS on behalf of the respondent. So the third stage, after folks are eligible, will be the request for proposal stage, which we will invite those shelters that have qualified to submit a full request for proposal. Folks will attend a bidders conference like today to learn more about the process and have an opportunity to ask questions. Respondents will have an opportunity to, again, partner with the program administrator, this time to develop the RFP. So this is really key. You're going to have support in identifying the improvement needs, if it's feasible, what kind of a budget you'll need, who are the architects and contractors you will be working with. So that is a key part of support for shelters going through this process. And then the respondent will complete the RFP application and return to DFSS. Selection criteria. We have 3 main areas. One is shelter operations experience and mission alignment with this project. Also, alignment with one or more goals of the initiative. And then organizational capacity and project feasibility. So first criteria, shelter operations experience and mission alignment. We are looking for respondents that operate a current shelter program effectively, doing a good job serving Chicagoans that are experiencing homelessness, whether it be literal homelessness, and that also includes shelter for survivors of domestic and gender-based violence. We are also asking that respondents demonstrate commitment to a trauma-informed barrier approach to housing. Again, these are best practices advocated nationally and here locally. You can find more information through the Chicago Continuum of Care Community Standards webpage. And respondents reflect and engage the diverse people of the community that you serve. And that is evidenced by your staff and board. Are there board members, staff members that reside in the community that you serve? Do they reflect the diversity of the clients? And are you engaging persons with lived experience? Those are all important diversity goals that we're looking for. Okay, so alignment with one or more goals of this initiative. So shelters that are in need of repairs or renovations to safely sustain their shelter operations are highly encouraged to complete this request. If you're about to shut the doors because the structural integrity of the building is in such poor condition, we need to know about those dire situations. Another goal would be shelters that want to restore or expand bed capacity because they reduced the number of beds that they were able to provide due to the pandemic and public health guidance. So looking to restore beds that were lost. And the shelter facility is congregate in its setting, and you want to transition or convert to a non-congregate shelter. We're also interested in improving accessibility within the shelter system. So if your shelter facility lacks ADA accessible beds or bathrooms, and wants to increase the accessibility, we're also interested in those proposals. So this is important. These are all goals of this initiative, but you don't have to, your proposal does not have to align with all of the goals, but it must align with at least one. Okay, so the final selection criteria is organizational capacity and project feasibility, where we want to see that the shelter has the capacity to conduct ongoing shelter operations should we provide significant rehab funding. We want to make sure that you're not going to disappear in 3 years down the road, that you, shelter respondents demonstrate previous experience successfully managing repairs or renovations for your shelter facility. That would be a key determinant of feasibility. You've got that kind of experience, hopefully successful experience in the past. And maybe most importantly is that you are able to leverage additional resources to support the project that you're proposing. So we are highly encouraging all of our respondents to reach out to your funders to let them know about this opportunity, because it's an amazing opportunity. Most funders, maybe all funders that are working with homeless shelters know a little bit about it, and they may be able to find some extra funding. You just don't know, and it's worth the ask. So leveraging is really key. Okay, as for attachments, we're trying to have this whole process be as simple as possible. We do require that you provide documentation that you are in your shelter location legally. And how will we know that? For shelters that rent, you must attach a current lease. And secondly, a written statement of commitment from the building owner. So this is really key. In order to propose facility improvements, the owner of the building must be involved. So they must know about this project and have buy-in for the initiative. They must consent to modify the property and agree to up to 30 years of restrictive covenants, basically, so that the rent won't go through the roof once the repairs are made or the conversions are made. That the owner will continue the usage of the building as a shelter, and that the shelter operators have the first right of refusal to purchase the building. So if the owner decides to sell the building, they should come to the shelter operator first to see if you're able and interested. For shelter operators who own, we're asking for evidence of ownership, like a mortgage statement. And then similar to the statement of commitment from the building owner, we're asking for an affidavit that commits to providing shelter in this facility for a minimum of 10 years through 2032 at least. And also those restrictive 30-year, up to 30-year covenants to be clear that the property will continue to be used as a shelter, and that the city would have the first right of refusal should the agency decide to sell the building. Okay, additional guidance for applicants. So respondents must submit a separate RFQ if you are interested in funding more than one shelter site. And there are other considerations that DFS may take into account to ensure that system level needs are being met, which includes the geography of the shelters, their ability to serve specific subpopulations, and the impact of system level shelter bed capacity in combination with other projects. So just making sure that we are at least sustaining, ideally increasing beds through this process and not losing beds as a result. So the selection and implementation timeline. The RFQs are due in 3 weeks. That's March 24th. Qualified applicants will be notified and connected to the PA in late April to begin the facility assessments with the selected shelters, which will be conducted in the second quarter of this year. Our grantee finalists will be invited to submit RFPs also in the third quarter of this year. And the RFPs will be due in the third quarter as well. And the most exciting part is grant awards will be announced and contracts will be executed in the fourth quarter. So this is going to take some time in order for us to get to the point where we're actually releasing funds and starting to work on the implementing the construction projects. So again, applications are due on March 24th, 2023 at noon. And what we'd like to do at this time is to take a little break and see if you all have some questions that we can answer.
Thank you so much, Amy and Kim. We do have some awesome questions that we can go over right now. And as other people have questions, please put them in the chat box, or not in the chat, rather in the questions box. We can go over them now. All of these questions will be answered, and we will put them into an amendment that will be posted to the DFS, to the application in procurement associated with this opportunity. That will take probably a week or so to get that posted, but then you'll have them to see. So if you don't remember, or if somebody come up with another question, you can also call Amy or Kim, and those questions also will be included into an amendment document. So just to get started here, the first question here that we had was, are shelter facilities not currently funded through DFSS able to submit through this RFQ process? And the answer is yes. We're looking for all shelters who are eligible or have projects that they want to get done through here. Another question is new construction to add on to an existing shelter being considered? So does this opportunity, does it cover expanding, I guess, the footprint of your shelter? Can you use this money for that? And Amy, Kim?
Yeah, I can go ahead and chime in on this one, and then also try to address the next question that I think is related here, which is, if an organization is interested in expanding bed capacity, would funding under this initiative help with renovating new space apart from the current space already in use? So I want to start by saying, at this stage, we're really seeking to qualify shelters based on sort of facility need and overall goals. So we don't need, very specifics on, what the project would look like yet. And the next stage of sort of project readiness reviews, those facility assessments on sort of what is doable within existing facilities will help us sort of narrow that down with our selected finalists. But at this point, I would say we are not sort of ruling out final projects that may include construction or additions.
And those additions that would help, that would include expand the bed capacity.
Yes, exactly. Thanks.
Then here is, will a template for the affidavit form be provided, or do respondents have to create their own?
We're going to put out a sample affidavit letter and post that along with the FAQs next week.
That will be part of the amendment that we do. We'll post that
Exactly.
additional question. We have 3 shelter programs that are in a campus model with many overlapping program spaces and building systems. The work needed to convert to non-congregate and be ADA compliant would affect all 3 programs due to the shared spaces. So our question is, would it be appropriate to apply for one RFQ for all 3 shelters, or would creating 3 separate RFQ applications be mandatory with 1 shelter per application, / program? Good question.
That's a great question. I can chime in on this one. I think the important piece that we're looking for is a separate RFQ for each facility. And really that's because, we're going to be then going out to facilities to sort of assess feasibility of the proposed goals. So it is not sort of one RFQ per program, it's one RFQ per building. But I guess also to add quickly on that one, I think useful to include in that RFQ, though, understanding that multiple programs may be accessing that same building, I think useful to include the context of how that building is currently used across multiple programs.
So it would behoove the applicant to indicate that even though they're doing 3 separate applications, that these are buildings located on this, in proximity to one another, in a similar, they're not disparate, and that they do share space.
Yeah.
Do we have an example of the owner's affidavit? I think that we addressed that.
Yes.
If the construction requires a temporary displacement of the shelter, will funds be available to cover that as in a short-term lease? Is that an allowable cost?
That's a great question. Through the funding that is in this RFQ, so through our $20 million in bond funding as part of the Chicago Recovery Plan and the home ARP funding that we anticipate to supplement, that funding is only for sort of capital improvements. However, I think understanding that there's implications of making improvements to facilities that may require shelters to relocate in the short term. We do not have money set aside for that, but I think that would absolutely be a conversation between finalists and DFSS.
Are shelters that are planning on converting from congregate living to NCS but will lose 3 or 4 beds be eligible to apply for this program or funding?
Absolutely, yes.
Let's see, it's hard to add bathrooms in private rooms without expanding square footage. Yes. And is there a character limit for the responses on the RFQ? Oh, Mr. Dukenzeller, you are a man after my own heart. We will cover that in the next section. But yes, there is a character limit of 4,000 characters, including spaces and punctuation per question. If 2 buildings make up one program located next door to each other but share all resources, should they be 2 separate RFQs?
For this one, I think we might need a little bit more detail. I think feel free to maybe shoot Amy Cornell and me an email. I'll drop our emails in the response, and we can get a little bit more detail to you to answer how you should submit.
Then, my favorite. Will awardees receive DFSS funds to pay directly for renovation projects, or will we be required to pay for projects first and then be reimbursed?
So the projects, go ahead, Kim.
I was going to say we are still sort of working through some of the funding specifics. All of that will be part of the detail that is included in the RFP once we get to that stage. But we do recognize, the difficulty of asking agencies to have the cash flow to do a lot of this. So we will be looking for as much flexibility as we can in doing, front loading funds so that we are not delaying capital project starts.
problem with City of Chicago funding, in that our fundings, as apparently Mr. Muhammad is aware, operate mostly on a reimbursement basis. We do have, for some of our funding, we are able to offer advance, but that advance currently is capped at 20% of the program cost. So it's never going to be that you get all of your money up front, but you will get some of it. However, even being able to provide that sum is a question that is yet that can't be determined. It's hard to determine at this particular point in the process, as Kim indicated. So if there are other questions, I'll have a little bit of time here for other questions, but if not, I'm just going to go on with the presentation to talk about how do you make this application in the e-procurement system. You can continue to put your questions in the question box, and we'll break after I make this, talk to you about how your life is going to be permanently changed, and your life, probably you'll just be like a whole new person by the time you're done with this application. And we can talk about more about questions, answer more questions then. So I'm the person who manages the RFP process for the city, for DFSS. I look at a lot of applications, and I do a lot of RFPs every year, and I've been doing it for a while. So these are my tips. You can take them as you will. My mantra is start early, save often. I often joke that if I was to get a tattoo, it might say that, although as much as I love my job, I'm not sure if I'm ready to commit. So if you've never done business with the City of Chicago, which I'm assuming that most of you have, but if you haven't, you're going to need an iSupplier account. An iSupplier is a vendor account that is you control, but is you request from the City of Chicago Department of Procurement Services, and you use your iSupplier account to access e-procurement, which is where you apply for money, you manage your contract, you upload your vouchers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if you don't have an iSupplier account, please go get one now. It takes a minute. You're going to have to upload some stuff, and then you're going to wait for from 2 hours to 5 days for the Department of Procurement Services to email you back with a link that allows you to continue setting up your account. Once you do that, your account is ready to go, and you're ready to engage in the procurement processes of the City of Chicago. If you are a person, such as some of the people asking questions, that need to submit more than one proposal, you are going to submit each proposal under a separate, and I need to say this again, separate, unique, registered account user that has been given online bidding responsibilities within your organization's iSupplier account. So you don't need multiple iSupplier accounts. You have one iSupplier account, and you have separate, unique user accounts that have online bidding permissions or responsibilities. And they can all have the same email address, but they got to have separate names. If you submit with one user account, when you submit application A, it will go through. And then when you submit application B with that same user account, it will overwrite application A, archive it, and it will go through. So, and then you're going to be like, well, hi, I submitted 2 applications. Where are they? They aren't, because when you submit application B, it writes over and essentially throws out application A, and same for application C. So those of you who are looking at 1 or 2 or 3 potential applications for this RFP, set up your user account so that you can do it. I know it's kind of a pain, but it's going to be a lot worse if you think that you're going to submit 3. You think that you submitted 3 applications and you've only submitted 1 because you've written over the other 2. Read the RFP or RFQ, in this case, narratives and selection criteria and applications closely. We spend a certain amount of time. We spend a lot of time developing all of these things, these documents for you. I know that they're a little dense, and they maybe are not like the most exciting read you've ever had, although this one is actually maybe one of the more exciting reads I've had, at least in the RFQ or RFP universe. And understand that these are all linked together. We have the narrative. From the narrative comes the selection criteria. From the narrative and the selection criteria come the application questions. From all of these things come our evaluation criteria. It's all linked together. So if you're wondering about your questions or you want guidance on what we're looking for, Read those narrative documents. They really do have a lot of information and can be quite helpful. As was I got you sort of trying to remember. See, I got this the preview. Remember, there is a 4,000 character limit for all the questions. Each unique question gets 4,000 characters, and that includes spaces and punctuation. That's going to be about 2/3 of a single-spaced page using 12-point font. Don't use your back browser button when you are working in the e-procurement environment, because that will cause it to stop saving your work, and it won't tell you that it's doing that, and then 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 or 30 minutes later, it will give you an error message and none of your work will be saved. And then also don't forget to attach the required attachments. Every RFP requires at least a few, and we do look at those things, and we do need those things to make sure that you are eligible to do business with the City of Chicago and enter into a contract with us. And if it's a more subject matter sort of attachment, we'd actually look at those, because we want to see, we weren't just asking this to ask. We want to see your organizational chart or your resumes or the job descriptions or whatever the things that we are asking for. This particular RFQ is pretty light on those requirements, but it still stands. Don't wait until the last minute to submit. Try to submit, I'm saying, a day or two before this deadline. I'm saying this for a couple of reasons. One, if you're a newbie, I will go through slides on how to submit. It's a little bit trickier than, say, you're sending an email. You get all sorts of stuff. The other reason I'm telling you to submit early is this is due on the 24th. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 4 different RFPs aside from this one due just around then. And so I want to make sure, if you need the technical support or assistance to do this application, that you are able to get a hold of me or my colleagues at the e-procurement hotline. I don't want you to miss an opportunity to submit on that kind of a technicality. Also, it makes for a much more pleasant experience if you submit a little early, and that way, if there is a problem, you have the time to solve the problem, or I have the time to solve the problem. Because as many of you know, late applications will not be accepted, and there are no exceptions for that. We just can't do it. The only way we can accept a late application is if we basically reissue the entire application, RFP or RFQ again, and then we do the RFP or RFQ again, and then we make everybody who applied reapply. I see here that I have a slide missing. The second slide is when I talk about how are you going to get technical support or help if you need it. There are a couple of different ways to do this, and I will put this in the amendment, no doubt. And I will put the extra slide into this deck when it gets posted, and it will be posted onto the DFSS website. But basically, what I will say is there's a number of ways you can get information, technical support, and assistance. The first way is you can call me, and my number and email address are at the end of this presentation. It's Julia Talbot at cityofchicago.org or 312-743-1679. You can also call the e-procurement hotline, and they are at 312-744-HELP or 4357, or you can email them at customersupport@cityofchicago.org. They operate 9 to 5. I operate 9 to 5, but I also pick up the phone other hours. They tend not to. I try to get if you have a question or a problem, I will try to get back to you within 24 hours, which I almost always do. And the e-procurement hotline, because they're providing services to the entire city, they might sometimes take a minute or two longer than I do. But they do have a higher level of access and some deeper knowledge on some stuff that they can do. So if you're really having a problem, you might get referred to them. But those are ways to get technical assistance. There are also, on the City of Chicago's e-procurement website pages, there is a page that has training documentation where there's lots of screenshots with slides or videos on how to do the basic functions in the e-procurement universe. So those things are all available to you. I'm now going to go through the two most common things that people do in have to do in e-procurement. So here we are, how to accept an amendment. We do amendments for a couple of reasons. We do it if we need to communicate something with you. Most likely, in this case, it's going to be that we're going to communicate you the webinar question and answers with you. If we needed to extend a deadline, or we're adding money, or somehow the scope of the program changed radically, or even not so radically, we will do an amendment to communicate all of those things to you. You will need to accept this amendment in order to either start or continue your application. When you do an application, if you've already started an application, the amendment comes out, you're going to accept the amendment and the process of accepting the amendment is going to draw all the work that you've already done into the new amended RFQ environment. So in this case, I'm going to show you the screenshots of what it's going to look like when you accept the amendment. So here, the RFP you want to apply to or have applied to is being amended. You get this warning. If it had not been amended, to start your application, you would just go to this actions bar, set it to create, quote, and hit go. But in this case, it's been amended. So you're going to click this blue View Amendment History. That's going to take you to this screen, and you're going to start the acceptance and acknowledgement process here. So if you want to look at the RFP itself, you're going to hit this document number stuff. You see here in the middle, under title, there's an amendment description that's like a little one sentence about what is the amendment about. And then you can review changes by clicking on this eyeglass or infinity icon. After you've reviewed the changes, you've looked at the documentation we provided that really goes into greater depth about what the amendment is about and learned all there is to know, you're ready to acknowledge the amendment, which you're going to do by clicking on the upper or lower right-hand side buttons that say Acknowledge Amendments. From then on, you're going to go to this page where you accept the terms and conditions of the RFQ by checking this little box, and then you're going to acknowledge again. And then from here, you're going to get a confirmation, which you say yes to. I don't know why anybody would say no, but you do have an option if you want to just sort of go into a circle like that. But you're going to say yes. And from there, you're going to get this final confirmation of terms and conditions screen where you check the little I have read and accepted the terms and conditions, and you hit accept. And that is how you have accepted amendment. At that point, you will be put back into the e-procurement application that you have either started or that you are then ready to start. This is how you submit an application. So that's the amendment. You're going to see an amendment. It will have the questions and answers from this webinar in it, and the affidavit examples. So how to submit an application. As I said, it's sometimes a little tricky to submit an application in the e-procurement environment. So when you're ready to submit, you're going to save your RFQ document or your application document one last time by hitting save, and then you're going to hit continue. So after you hit continue, what happens then is e-procurement takes sort of a scan of what you're doing, and it kind of points out things that it thinks you might have done wrong or you need to attend to. So I'm going to go through the two most common errors that one sees. One is this RFQ control requires you to quote on all lines. In this case, we don't actually even require that you give us a budget because this is an RFQ, not an RFP, and we're going to ask for budget information later at the RFP stage. But the system is set up so that this is sort of a one-size-fits-all procurement program. Often, other kinds of bidding require that you fill out these lines, and so you'll get this error message requiring that you quote on the lines as well. You'll go in here. You'll see right here, there's this tab that says lines below it. You'll fill out all the different lines with placeholder numbers. You can put in whatever number you really want. Make up a number. I've encouraged lottery numbers, winning lottery numbers, but nobody takes me up on that. And then that should take care. If you put those placeholder numbers in there, you'll be good to go, and that error message will go away. Another common error message that we get is this: a quote value is required for requirement first name. In this case, this is e-procurement speech for saying that you've skipped a question. So quote value, as you can see down here, is answers. This is that box that is limited to 4,000 characters, including spaces and punctuation. Requirements is an e-procurement term for your application questions, and the application questions each have unique names to them. In this case, it's application question name first name that was not filled out. Once you fill that out with your first name or the answer of your choice, I suppose, you get radical and not put your first name in there. That error message will go away. So when you have addressed all of your errors, and there's usually one or two per application, when you hit continue, you're going to get into this review and submit phase, and you're almost there. You're really getting towards the end here. So at this point, you're going to be able to scroll through your entire application and see all of your quote values or your answers, right? And when you scroll through, and at the bottom, there's going to be a place for you to put an electronic signature in. So be sure you put in your name and your title before you check the box, or else you'll get an error message saying that you need to put in your name and title before you check the box, even though the box is above the name and the title. This just bugs me about it. And then if you look over onto the right-hand side of the screen, you will see this submit button. I can't fit it in one screenshot and have it be like legible to human eyes. So when you hit submit, you should get this confirmation page, and then you should also get an e-procurement generated email, which often goes to spam within 24 hours of your submission. You can also call or email me, and I'm happy to check that we've received your application. I can see it really within seconds of your pressing submit, and I'm happy to confirm that your application or your multiple applications, as the case might be. So that is really all I have to say about e-procurement. If you want to get a hold of myself, Amy, because you have programmatic questions, you should call her. And then if you want to call me for non-programmatic questions, or you want to just talk about how e-procurement is, in fact, the best thing that has ever happened to anyone, you should call me. You can call me for programmatic questions if you would like, but my answer is going to be that you need to call me. At this point, we're going to open it up, and I see that any number of other questions came in while I was chatting. And so let's see what we have here. I guess we have, let me scroll down. Buttons. Excuse me. Very specific RFQ question. Under shelter infrastructure, first question, what's your shelter's name? For a scenario with multiple shelter programs in one building, we would name the program and explain the shared space here. And the answer would be, Kim, would you, or Amy?
Yep, this would be, yes, go ahead and put multiple shelter program names in response to that question if you have multiple shelter programs operating in one building. That works great. And Julia, I can take the next one too, which is, which I think I understood this question, but please chime in if I didn't. If in the work being done through this RFQ, there is opportunity for expansion of beds, would DFSS consider expansion funding? And yes, we're very interested in funding projects that would expand bed capacity. I think this maybe takes us back to the question on, what would this look like to do construction or, expansion of existing facilities. That is certainly within the realm of possibility for this funding opportunity. I think in my hopes of sort of distinguishing us from the DOH program, we are not looking to sort of acquire new facility, like entirely new facilities through this funding because there was the opportunity through DOH for that, but we are open to, working to meet the need, however that looks with existing shelter facilities, and are very interested in expanding the number of beds we have in our system.
I have no idea why I was coughing so much. Yes, I'm glad that you like e-procurement, Mr. Winter. You might be you're one of the few, I have a feeling. So this is time that we have. I mean, this is sort of your time. If you have additional questions, if not, then we're going to conclude this RFP, or this presentation rather, not the RFP, that's not due till the 24th. And I can't thank all of you enough for attending. I think this is such a great opportunity to improve stuff, shelters for the citizens especially who need them in Chicago. And we so appreciate the work that everybody does on behalf of the shelter system and behalf of Chicago's homeless populations. I hope that you have a wonderful Friday. I don't know, are we still supposed to get snow? Who knows? But if we are supposed to get all the weather that was anticipated, I hope everybody has a safe commute home if you're not already working at home. Do you have any final thoughts or things to say, Kim or Amy?
No, just thank you, Julia. Thank you, Amy, and thanks everyone. And yes, good luck with the snow today.
Yeah, we're looking forward to your requests. And good luck with them. Make sure you follow up with me if you have any questions.
Oh, Jackie, I wish I could go home, but no, unfortunately not until 5. So happy Friday. And yeah, I can't wait to see your applications and all the great things that you guys propose. Take care.